Welcome. Today we will be reading Lesson 43 in the workbook and from the text, Chapter 5, Section 3, The Guide to Salvation, paragraphs 8 through 11. And now for Lesson 43. God is my source, I cannot see apart from Him. Perception is not an attribute of God. His is the realm of knowledge. Yet He has created the Holy Spirit as the mediator between perception and knowledge. Without this link with God, perception would have replaced knowledge forever in your mind. With this link with God, perception will become so changed and purified that it will lead to knowledge. That is its function as the Holy Spirit sees it. Therefore, that is its function in truth. In God you cannot see. Perception has no function in God and does not exist. Yet in salvation, which is the undoing of what never was, perception has a mighty purpose, made by the Son of God for an unholy purpose. It must become the means for the restoration of His holiness to His awareness. Perception has no meaning, yet does the Holy Spirit give it a meaning very close to God's. Healed perception becomes the means by which the Son of God forgives his brother and thus forgives himself. You cannot see apart from God because you cannot be apart from God. Whatever you do in Him, because whatever you think with His mind. If vision is real, and it is real to the extent to which it shares the Holy Spirit's purpose, then you cannot see apart from God. 3 5-minute practice periods are required today, one as early and one as late as possible in the day. The third may be undertaken at the most convenient and suitable time that circumstances and readiness permit. At the beginning of these practice periods, repeat the idea for today to yourself with eyes open. Then glance around you for a short time, applying the idea specifically to what you see. 4 or 5 subjects for this phase of the practice period are sufficient. You might say, for example, God is my source. I cannot see this desk apart from Him. God is my source. I cannot see that picture apart from Him. Although this part of the exercise period should be relatively short, be sure that you select the subjects for this phase of practice indiscriminately, without self-directed inclusion or exclusion. For the second and longer phase, close your eyes, repeat today's idea again, and then let whatever relevant thoughts occur to you add to the idea in your own personal way. Thoughts such as, I see through the eyes of forgiveness. I see the world as blessed. The world can show me myself. I see my own thoughts which are like God's. Any thought related more or less directly to today's idea is suitable. The thoughts need not bear any obvious relationship to the idea, but they should not be in opposition to it. If you find your mind wandering, if you begin to be aware of thoughts which are clearly out of accord with today's idea, or if you seem to be unable to think of anything, open your eyes, repeat the first phase of the exercise period, and then attempt the second phase again. Do not allow any protracted period to occur in which you become preoccupied with irrelevant thoughts. Return to the first phase of the exercises as often as necessary to prevent this. In applying today's idea in the shorter practice periods, the form may vary according to the circumstances and situations in which you find yourself during the day. When you are with someone else, for example, try to remember to tell him silently, God is my source. I cannot see you apart from him. This form is equally applicable to strangers, as it is to those you think are closer to you. In fact, try not to make the distinctions of this kind at all. Today's idea should also be applied throughout the day to various situations and events that may occur, particularly to those which seem to distress you in any way. For this purpose, apply the idea in this form. God is my source. I cannot see this apart from him. If no particular subject presents itself to your awareness at the time, merely repeat the idea in its original form. Try today not to allow any long periods of time to slip by without remembering today's idea, and thus remembering your function. Perception is the projection of thought outward in the form of images. In truth, perception does not exist, yet it makes a world of appearances whose purpose is to hide the awareness of love. Yet the Holy Spirit uses perception as a means to re-establish one's innocence and perfection into one's awareness. By transforming perception, one is able to envision the sacredness of others and oneself. By acknowledging one's source as love, one is enabled to perceive the loveliness of the other, as well as everything in the world. When one is with someone, one is asked in the exercises today to say to oneself silently, God is my source. I cannot see you apart from him. Thus one is calling upon the godliness in one's mind to extend into the image of the other, revealing their inner beauty and their purity. And now for our text reading for today, from chapter 5, section 3, The Guide to Salvation, paragraphs 8 through 11. You cannot understand yourself alone. This is because you have no meaning apart from your rightful place in the sonship. And the rightful place of the sonship is God. This is your life, your eternity, and yourself. It is of this that the Holy Spirit reminds you. It is this that the Holy Spirit sees. This vision frightens the ego because it is so calm. Peace is the ego's greatest enemy because, according to its interpretation of reality, war is the guarantee of its survival. The ego becomes strong in strife. If you believe there is strife, you will react viciously, because the idea of danger has entered your mind. The idea itself is an appeal to the ego. The Holy Spirit is as vigilant as the ego to the call of danger, opposing it with his strength, just as the ego welcomes it. The Holy Spirit counters this welcome by welcoming peace. Eternity and peace are as closely related as are time and war. Perception derives meaning from relationships. Those you accept are the foundations of your beliefs. The separation is merely another term for a split mind. The ego is the symbol of separation, just as the Holy Spirit is the symbol of peace. What you perceive in others, you are strengthening in yourself. You may let your mind misperceive, but the Holy Spirit lets your mind reinterpret its own misperception. perceptions. The Holy Spirit is the perfect teacher. He uses only what your mind already understands to teach you that you do not understand it. The Holy Spirit can deal with a reluctant learner without going counter to his mind, because part of it is still for God. Despite the ego's attempts to conceal this part, it is still much stronger than the ego, although the ego does not recognize it. The Holy Spirit recognizes it perfectly because it is his own dwelling place, the place in the mind where he is at home. You are at home there too, because it is a place of peace, and peace is of God. You who are part of God are not at home except in his peace. If peace is eternal, you are at home only in eternity. The ego made the world as it perceives it, but the Holy Spirit, the reinterpreter of what the ego made, sees the world as a teaching device for bringing you home. The Holy Spirit must perceive time and reinterpret it into the timeless. He must work through opposites, because he must work with and for a mind that is in opposition. Correct and learn, and be open to learning. You have not made truth, but truth can still set you free. Look as the Holy Spirit looks, and understand as he understands. His understanding looks back to God in remembrance of me. He is in communion with God always, and he is part of you. He is your guide to salvation, because he holds the remembrance of things past and to come, and brings them to the present. He holds this gladness gently in your mind, asking only that you increase it in his name by sharing it to increase his joy in you. In this section, we learn that the Holy Spirit teaches one that what one thought one understood was actually a misunderstanding, and then reinterprets it for oneself. The Holy Spirit can speak to one's mind that is aligned with the truth, the part of one's mind that the ego is not even aware of. This part of one's mind is a place of peace, as well as the Holy Spirit's home. The ego, on the other hand, thrives on conflict and fear. The idea of danger is actually a call to the ego to enter one's mind. The ego sees the world as a place of threat, but the Holy Spirit sees the world as a place of learning for the purpose of awakening one to the truth of what one is. By being open to correction and changing one's mind, the truth arrives and sets one free. And by sharing one's newfound freedom with others, one's own joy as well as the Holy Spirit's is increased.